Gentlemen, how are you? Today we have Paul Goranson. Paul Goranson is a fantastic individual. Timo Pareto, who has been on the podcast before, met Paul and said, listen, you got to get this guy on. He's going to be great for you, for the podcast. And he's got a fantastic business background, especially in the energy sector, which we're definitely going to dive into. But for now, Paul, welcome, sir. How are you?
Well, I'm doing well, and thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. So you're north of the border for us here in the States. You live up in Canada, correct?
No, actually, I live in Texas.
No
So
kidding. Okay, got it.
yeah. So I formerly worked for a Canadian-based company, but now I grew up and live in the same town I'm in right now, down in South Texas.
Got it. Makes sense. Perfect. Absolutely. So tell us a bit about yourself.
Well, I've been in the energy business, primarily in what's called the uranium business for nearly 38 years. Got into it not expecting to be in that business. I was expecting to get rich in the oil field, and then I've been staying in the business ever since. As much as I've been trying to get out, I keep staying in. And until recently, I left a job as a CEO of a uranium mining company that is producing uranium right now to serve the nuclear fuel cycle, clean energy, nuclear energy, and I've been in this industry on just about every aspect, from the mining to the even on working with nuclear power plant, not in the plants, but working with the business side of it. So it's a pretty broad experience, and I pretty much, if you could think of it, I've pretty much done it if you know the business.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm curious to dive deeper in that, especially when we talk about the future of energy. You have two grown kiddos and some grandkids.
That's right. I'm very proud of all of them. They're
Fantastic.
wonderful.
Yeah, I'm curious to learn your guidance through all the things that you've gone through in raising those two kids and now with the grandkids. So, we're definitely going to dive into some things, but first, there's a lot of challenges that men in particular in this society are going through right now. From your perspective, with your experience, Paul, can you kind of give me your thoughts on what are some of the challenges that men in particular are facing today in our society?
Well, I think that that what's changed from my time when I was a father is that obviously you've gotten much more online. There's much more going on, particularly for the children. It's hard to find a kid that doesn't have a phone in their hand. It's there's Even the schools are relying on technology to provide the information rather than books. So uh, when my kids were in elementary, middle school, high school, it wasn't that distinctly different from when I was in school back in the late 60s and 70s. When I talk about kind of the materials they covered and all that, now granted that the level of activities were significantly higher, but the peer pressure is not really no different. Just the context may have been slightly different. You fast forward to now, with the influence of social media, I see that in my grandchildren, what social media is doing and some of the pressures are doing. One thing is that, and it's getting influence from all angles. Even the schools are looking at ways to address some of these peer pressure, but it just seems like it's much more intense on the youth, creating the tension between parents and the kids. I will say that in my experience, that regardless of the challenges the kids have, they're incredibly resilient, and most of them will figure it out on their own. But sometimes you have to go through some rather uh, tough times. And I could tell you from my perspective, there were times that my son did what I would call some of the most stupid things, and I had to reflect back on a prior time when Bill Cosby was a kind of an influence for fathers before his fall. A lot of the experience he related on just his own comedy albums, I experienced as a father myself, and so there was it when you realize that you're not the only one experiencing it. You may be looking at it from your perspective. It makes it easier to make decisions that maybe you're not making the wrong decisions. Kids are going to be kids. I would say my daughter and myself have a much different relationship than my son and I did during his youth. Now that they're adults, they're doing everything on their own. Obviously, now we still have to kind of support them financially because of just the expense, the cost of everything else. But they're doing things on their own. They're self-motivated. They're raising great kids, and they're doing a great job. And that gives me kind of a measure of feeling success. Is that I didn't raise kids that were set up to fail. And that's if I had one advice to fathers out there, is that whatever you do when you have your children doing things, keep in mind is that what you want to do is make sure you're not setting up for them to fail, but let them do it. Do what they need to do, and always be there if they fall. Be there to pick them up, but let them try, let them adventure. They're not going to succeed if they don't get some experiences. Your life experiences are really with what you learn from failure. You got to let them try, and if they fail, help them out, but don't set them up to fail. I guess that's my biggest philosophy I have. And I take that into my business career when I'm training people, when I got people who work for me, who I expect them to do business with them. I treat them similarly, that you give them enough, in a business context, we say give them enough rope to hang themselves on, but don't let them actually accomplish that. I believe that as a result of that, I've been able to breed some successful leaders. I would say that some of my experience was also came up through training I was a scoutmaster for a Boy Scout troop of 65 boys. And you have every single personality. So that, I hate to say it, but after you deal with 65 different personalities, you realize maybe your kid's not so bad after all.
It's interesting when, you were raising your kiddos, you said they're 37 and
Yeah, 38. Yeah.
37, 38. So it was a little bit different, obviously, back then. It's a challenge these days because, I want to let my 9-year-old boy go ride his bike around the neighborhood.
Hmm.
And I'm worried that people are going to say, gosh, what are you letting this little child out of your sight for? And, that dichotomy has changed so significantly. And it just goes back to your point, Paul, in particular, you got to let them do their things. You got to let them cross the street and fall on their bike and be there to help them out, but don't coddle them because that's just causing
Yeah.
more and more challenges.
And when you've got for lack of a better phrase, people who have more time on their hands than they should, worrying about what your kids are doing, as long as you explain to your kids that you trust them, and that and they reward you with that trust coming back. And you know most kids don't, they have some decent judgment. They learn judgment, and they learn from trust and everything else. They need confidence, and you get confidence not by telling them what direction to go and restricting them from doing anything because you're worried about what the neighbors might say. It's building that trust with your kids to make sure that they, when they're riding around the neighborhood, don't do anything, for lack of a better phrase, stupid. Remember, you don't trespass on people's lawns, and don't, be respectful of other people. And that goes a long way. And that's what I've done with my kids. I mean, honestly, if I watched everything my kids did when they were young, I would be a nervous wreck all the time. And I learned to let them. They have the capability of being responsible young people, and if you don't let them show that, then they'll never develop that social skill.
You've had a very illustrious career. Moving up, obviously, the so-called corporate ladder, you've managed some very significant operations. When I reflect on my budding professional career, especially in a W-2 Fortune 500 environment, I kind of look back and I think, gosh, I kicked myself, right? There were times when I look back even 5 to 7 years ago and I say, had I just advocated for myself a little bit more, had I just done this and this, my trajectory could have completely changed and I would have been able to do this and that. So I'm curious, Paul, from your experience business wise, what are some times when you were at your lowest low in your career? And what did you do, sir, to kind of dig yourself out of that and position yourself to continue to move?
Yeah, there's been a couple of occasions like that, and And not to get bogged down in details, but there are times when I wondered if I made the right decision for whatever reason, and the odds were against me. And you know, if it looked like it was going to be something that was going to be very difficult, I would obviously bring my wife was always aware of it, but I would look to faith, and I would remember that my mother gave me something way back when my grandfather died, who I was very close to when I was in my early 20s. No, yeah, I was early 20s, and it was that poem someone wrote about, the footprints in the sand. I'm sure you're familiar with that. I remember those times. I remember reflect on that when times get tough. No, it doesn't solve all the problems, but it reminds you that there's someone else watching out for you. And and so typically, as a result of that, it gave me a little bit more confidence to be able to kind of buckle up, and buck up and do the job, and listen to if sometimes you're getting a warning message as a result of those dark times, that you need to change something in your approach. I've taken it as a tool to better myself. When I was in the beginning of my career, there was a time when I felt like I was failing. What I did was I went and talked to my boss, and then I did some things to change up. I went back to night school and worked on my graduate degree, something that would be kind of create a change in the way I was doing things. Another time, it was I was putting in a tremendous amount of hours, and when I got the warning message, I sat back and reflected, and I reflected on the fact that, well, maybe I was leaving something else behind when I was getting those dark points, and that was my family. And so I basically looked for another career. I resigned from my job, found another job, but that job allowed me to spend more time with my family. And yeah, it could have been, I could have been on a different career track and everything else, but those are decisions I made because I realized that I was losing something else in my life, and I recentered it. And and there's always been times when things happen that you don't expect, but in general, I've just been, I look at things I'm doing that I need to change, because it's if you get mired in the negative, you just never get out of it. And I've just, I found it just by looking at kind of doing a little soul searching of what I need to do differently. That's really helped me tremendously. And uh, do I always get it right? No, not always. But in the end run, I'm always coming out better as a whole than I am financially sometimes.
2 points really stuck out that I want to dive a bit deeper on if I can. The first one, which was interesting, is, and I struggle with this too, is it's comfortable. It's feels good when you're in a job, even if it's a job that you don't feel confident or comfortable or happy with. It feels tough to resign and to just move and find something else. You did it though. And I think that's
Yeah.
something that obviously takes a ton of guts, of gusto. Can you dive a little bit deeper into, that decision point? And obviously that was a good decision because you were able to continue to move up in your professional career and acumen after the fact. But gosh, that was a tough decision.
It was. The easy decision was to sit there and just kind of mire myself into, these days we call it a toxic environment, et cetera. And I made a decision just to make a clean break, and take I stayed in the industry, but I was able to leverage relationships I had in the industry to get a different job in a different role, different company. And that was the right decision to make at the time. That's what set me on my trajectory, is because that change got me out of being, in a very toxic environment where I was never going to succeed, and get out and kind of break away and demonstrate some of my what I bring to the table on from a skills level to a business, and allowed me to become exposed to more people, in the industry, get outside of my comfort zone, and also build relationships. And so I'm a firm believer in building relationships from a career perspective. There's some folks I've worked with in the industry. No, you don't want to deal with anybody because you want to keep everything tight so that there's no secrets, and you don't need to be helping people out. But what I've found is that doing, being respectful, and when someone's in need, providing some support, even if they're with a competitor, has paid off dramatically, both not only from me personally, but also from my employer's benefit. My employer was able to benefit from some of those relationships and drawing on those relationships. And I've done the same thing politically too, with in on the government affairs side, you support, help support a politician, whether it's financially or provide support for them to advance some initiative of theirs. They remember that, and then when you need some support, they're there to help. And it's and a lot of I've been criticized sometimes of being too nice to people and too helpful, but it goes back to it's there's a saying that escapes me right now, but sometimes just kind of paying it forward or whatever you want to call it, but just trying to create that sense of trust and engagement, uh, and knowing that other people will come to you, having faith that other people will come to you when you need them in your life. And I would tell you, every time I've taken a change, it's been because, and that change has been successful because of the relationships that I've built with people outside of kind of my internal network, for lack of a better phrase.
How old were your kids when you made that move?
Uh, the first one, the big move I made was so my son would have been 11, and my daughter was 10 at that time. So my son was in fifth grade, my daughter was in fourth grade.
Yeah, immense pressure. You
Yeah,
mentioned you mentioned a couple times, Paul, faith. What role does or does not faith play in both your decisions you made back then and your life now?
it makes a lot of, there's a lot of, it factors a lot into every decision I make. I don't do, I pray quite a bit. I pray daily, if not multiple times a day, and for guidance. And my faith is what drives me on some of the decisions I make. And, and it's not, I'm waiting for a word or word from God or something like that. It just provides that knowledge to me and that whatever decision I make, obviously I'm making it, and it's not from some I can't say it's from divine intervention or divine guidance, but I don't it gives me that basically to recenter myself and making those decisions. It's not about me, it's about everything, and that gives me by just simply sitting down and saying a prayer has been able to help me just take a pause and make sure I'm considering everything in that thought process instead of making a rash decision.
I've kind of been on this faith journey for the past year or so and really diving deeply into it. And as I, like you, would pray once, twice a day, it was always a thank you this, thank you that, but I would feel guilty saying, would you provide for me and would you help me to move up in life? A colleague and a good friend of mine told me to read the prayer of Jabez. I'm not sure if you've heard of that at all.
I've
But
heard of it,
basically
but
what it is,
go on.
no, you're fine. It's in Chronicles, First Chronicles, and basically what it is Jabez. It's only listed once in the Bible. Is a very troubled individual, and he prayed to God, "Will you bless me? Not thank you, not anything else. Bless me. Uh, Help me expand my territory. Guide me with your hand and keep me free from evil and from the devil." And those four things, God said, yes, absolutely. And that book, if you haven't read it, I highly recommend, basically says it's okay to ask to be blessed so that you can go forward and do the Lord's work, which is absolutely a perfect change for me because now I can say, hey, can you bless me by bringing Paul Goranson into this world so we can share your message, sir? So those kind of things, I think they're really paying off.
Yeah, I agree, and I do ask for guidance. I ask for strength. I ask for blessings. Uh, and I do, but also give thanks, but also I confess that I'm a sinner too at the same time. And that's why I need his strength and guidance. And the and that's guided me and strengthened me and given me confidence throughout all the ups and downs of my career. And I take all my successes and give credit to my faith, and I use my faith when it's the darkest to pull me out.
Let's change gears a little bit if we can, sir.
Sure.
You obviously were in the energy business, and you have a pulse on things both present, past, and of course future that not many people do. So can you kind of just give me an appreciation of the state of the energy economy, or how things are going right now and how things are looking to be going forward?
Yeah. So the energy economy, obviously, strong economies are driven by energy. So when we talk about impoverished countries versus rich countries, it's energy that sets them apart. It's not GDP. GDP is driven by energy, and having abundant and expensive energy is key. What we've learned as a society is that we've learned that energy generation comes at a cost. We've seen that with pollution and everything else. So you have to sit back and look at ways to generate. How do we generate that energy, stay prosperous, and everything else? We've learned over the last 20 years that sometimes energy transitions, like going from I would call base generator or base energy, base load energy, and dispatchable energy to going to renewables, has not been the panacea that that was advertised to be, because it turns out when you go to a passive energy system source, you're relying tremendously on other resources, including heavy minerals, mineral resource, just for the assets to generate the electricity. So the way you create energy abundance is by finding by using energy that requires a small amount of it, relatively, in other words, generates more energy than what the inputs that go into it. So whether it's natural gas fired generation, and in my world, nuclear energy is being a key part of it. What we've seen is that having a strong energy basis is driving our economy. It's why we've been strong. I know we've had various political movements talking about the benefits of clean energy being renewables and everything, but those have not grown significantly as contributors to the driving the overall consumption and supporting the demand. We've been making it up with natural gas generation, and now we've seen, I've been in the nuclear industry for over nearly 40 years, and I've seen it go from being, becoming, I got into it after 3 Mile Island, and for the first 35 years of well, 30 years of my career was it was going to be, it was going to be fewer and fewer reactors, but we've found that we can't do without them. If we want to increase the generation, if we want to create the energy uh, economy, we need those nuclear power plants operating. We need more of them. So we've seen a tremendous shift over the last 10 years to where energy, nuclear energy is it's not becoming a problem, it's not still a problem or a crisis. It's now a solution to our energy economy, supporting our energy economy. And I take the fact that over the last 5 years, we've had nuclear power plants that were scheduled to be shut down, and some that were actually shut down. Now we're restarting them. We're extending their lives because the fact is that renewables did not deliver, and we have to support these grids, these power grids, in order to support our economy. And that's not even, we haven't, and we're seeing more discussions about creating dispatchable power using small modular reactors, and placing those in repurposing coal generation sites with small modular reactor sites, and using the ability of those type of technologies to be able to drive energy efficiency and deliver where we have grid congestion issues and all that, and being able to take advantage of areas where there's low congestion to generate electricity to keep the grid up and running. And it's exciting for me because, like I said, when I got into this industry, it looked like it was on its way to wind down. In other words, I've been in the uranium side. Nuclear power plants are what are consuming the product commodity we produce, and based on projections, they were supposed to go away. But now we're seeing uh, a revigoration of the nuclear industry, but not because of we're talking about CO2 emissions and everything else. We're really seeing it as because of the energy density it creates. And that's what's important, is high energy density, because it minimizes the amount of natural resources that have the inputs that go in to generate that electricity and create those electrons flowing and keeping our iPhones charged and our iPads charged and everything else. And it's it's an exciting time right now for me, because I feel like all the hard work we've done over the last bulk of my time in the business has paid off. Keeping that infrastructure around, even though it's been significantly diminished, but trying to keep even the human infrastructure in place has been a challenge. But we've been able to keep some of it to where we can rebuild and basically bootstrap our efforts.
I feel like we're on the cusp of a massive transformation when it comes to everything you just articulated. You've got these data centers, AI centers, everything that are so power hungry. You've got the Trump administration, which is blasting down the regulations so that we can make the entry. And then you have these small modular reactors that you talked about, which could be placed at each one of these AI data centers to really provide that power. You feel like we're kind of on the cusp of something too?
Yeah, I do. I think it's going to be a radical change. You're going to find more generation across the grid. We're going to go back to the way things were in the 70s, where we had lots of generation around the country where it was needed. What's happened over as markets deregulated, and deployment of politically preferred generation, that's wind and solar, created these areas where a lot of the power generation was shut down and decommissioned, and more concentrated. So now you've got situations where we run into shortages of power. I lived in Texas in 2021 when we had Winter Storm Uri come through,
Yeah.
and we didn't have power at my house for 6 days. Fortunately, I had the foresight to have bought a natural gas fired backup generator to support my household. That was for hurricane season, not for winter, but still. But what it really showed was that the what happened when you go and deploy energy resources that are unreliable and without any kind of backup dispatchable power, because it fell out of favor, political favor. And it created a situation where literally Texas was within 20 minutes of a complete grid failure across the the frequency of the electricity was dropping down below, near the threshold where it set all the trips off and shut everything down. And what they found
Yeah.
when they what a post storm audit they found is that because of the money flowing into renewables, even the what they call the black sites that were around, scattered across the grid, that were going to kickstart restart everything, didn't operate because they weren't being
Yeah, they're
maintained,
all
because all
frozen
the
over
money
in
was
ice.
going into renewables. And so came on close to a real disaster, and that was a wake up call, I think, um, to the entire grid. And unfortunately, some of the solutions got muddled, and a lot of the green energy stuff and everything else. But the grid operators started creating pricing scenarios to allow the nuclear power plants to operate rather than shut down while the renewables were operating, provided the ability to have to deploy more natural gas coal-fired power plants to be able to have that dispatchable power when the grid didn't show up. But it was an object lesson that we could have been truly disastrous over and above what it was. But I think what it's done is that the people in the Trump administration right now are a lot of the people who were part of at the state level that were part of creating these solutions. Now they're driving policy to be able to build resilience. That's what the real point of what you see of the energy dominance, the Council for Energy Dominance, the council, and it's not only about building energy dominance, but it's about building resilience. As we grow and create more demand, we're going to, the administration's showing that it's appreciating the fact that there's real power with AI. They need energy with that. And I've worked with nuclear utilities who are actually working directly with these, with Amazon and with Amazon, Microsoft, and others to basically have these data centers right at the fence line of these nuclear power plants in order to have continuous dispatchable energy. When I lived in Wyoming, one of the big things that was there was that fact that I was living in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and about 20 miles west of it was this massive building, and it was a Microsoft cloud data center. And you know why it was located there? One is that at high altitude, it didn't need as much cooling, right? Because it was a cool environment. But the power was generated by coal, and it was a lot cheaper to get energy in Wyoming from coal generation than it was in Colorado because of all the deployment of all the renewables. And so that's why Microsoft took a bet. Obviously, I don't know if that data center is still there, if they moved it somewhere else, but those are the type of decisions you make. And I think that more and more it's being the small modular reactors and the current light water reactor fleet are being seen as a hedge on building out this resilience in the energy grid. Exciting times.
It's very exciting. I mean, even what's his name? O'Leary,
Yeah,
Mr.
Kevin
Wonderful
O'Leary.
on Shark Tank.
Yeah,
Yeah, he was talking about that. I saw an interview just the other day. North Dakota, they want your business. They're cool in terms of weather, things like that. From an investment standpoint, I'm sure you're investing your assets as they go forward. And for guys like me, where would you recommend if we have additional funds and capital that we want to invest and we want to kind of dip our toe into the SMR space, the energy space? Any guidance that you might have for us? Not investing advice,
I,
obviously.
yeah. Obviously, it's not investing advice, but what I've done is I put my money into energy stocks. So notwithstanding some uranium stocks, but also some nuclear power company stocks. I haven't gone into the SMR because I will transition some into SMRs like NewScale and others, but trying to find the right vehicle, the companies that are moving. So a lot of the SMR technology is being led by privately held companies, not necessarily public
Yeah.
yet. And so, trying to get that opportunity to be kind of one of the initial investors in that. So I also invest in other energy companies like Halliburton, Dow. Dow is actually building out small modular reactors in Texas, and
No kidding.
other
Dow Chemical?
yeah, Dow Chemical. They're
Huh.
deploying them into their Seadrift plant, and the first ones are going in. The government's committed to they've got a technology. It's the X Energy platform, and it's using a new style of fuel called TRISO fuel, which basically, instead of traditional fuel rods like we're used to seeing in pellets that are going into nuclear reactors, these are balls that are about the size, a little bit smaller than a standard billiard ball, and they pack them in the reactor vessel. It's really cool technology, really really cool. But it's a type of fuel that's being developed by BWXT. So if you want to, the challenge is BWXT is such a big company; it's not just nuclear focused. But if you want to see the guys that are on the cutting edge, BWXT is another one. heavy into the energy, but most people think about them being shipbuilders and things like that. But they're a big part of the country's developing research and development and new technologies at BWXT.
Fascinating. I'll try to link some of those down below so we can continue to
Yeah,
research. Yeah, I think it's the future. Absolutely.
yeah,
Land the plane here a little bit, Paul. I have a couple other questions for you. I think they're the most important ones, but I know you're retired. You're
yeah.
enjoying life, but if people wanted to, follow what you're doing, learn more about you, any place they can reach out to you at all?
Yeah, I have a presence on, a LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. I do, I'm on also on X.com. I'm not real active on it right now, but my handle's at Goranson Paul on X, and I can't remember exactly what it is on LinkedIn, but you can do a search for Paul
No
Goranson.
problem.
There are not a lot of Goransons out there, so you can narrow it down pretty fast. And
Understood.
but that's pretty much where I can be found on socials, and we'll see where life is taking me. But that's what we're doing.
Love it. Fantastic. So, last two questions. In your appreciation, sir, what would be your advice to dads like me and you who are watching right now who want to level up with their family, with their professional career in 2025? What's kind of something they can do to make a change today to really make that work?
Well, you know, that's a really good question. So I look at it from this perspective to level up with a dad is that obviously you've got to advance, you want to be in a situation where you're advancing your career and taking those career options. But I guess if I want to say to level up, I said just remember that your family is part of that too. So wherever your career goes, you take your family with you, and so keep them involved with your decisions as much as you can. And if it requires, your job requires, travel and everything else to make that career change, just never forget to spend time with your family. Don't just look at the career as being the sole thing in your life right now. You can, there's time if you sit down with your family understands you can do it over a short period of time, but you've got to bring your family with you and into it. Don't make that decision unilaterally because it impacts so much. But be there for your kids when you can. Fortunately, right now I'm there for my grandkids all the time. But I can tell you there's points in my life, when I talked to you about that big career change, where I sat back and realized that I missed my kids' childhood because I was too busy focusing on my job, and it wasn't getting me anywhere. And the job wasn't, it didn't do anything to improve my career at all at that point, other than, and so I've always taken the approach that every career change is always done with and my wife has always been part of that decision. And where when my kids were old enough to be able to understand it, they were part of the decision too. Did you get all that?
I see. I'm still, yeah, I did. You still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. I
Yep.
got this reconnecting showing up on my
Okay.
iPad here.
We're good. Yep, we're good. It's uploading. I still see you. Yeah, I watch so many people again in the Fortune 500 realm who focus so much on their jobs and they pursue every single thing. They're on the road every single week. And I just wonder if they're going to look back when their kids are out of the house and be really, really sad that they lived their life that way, which is definitely a reason I'm not trying to live mine that way. Talking to you and maybe building a little something to have a community of dads where we can all do this together. So
Yeah, I
thank you
agree.
for that. Last question. I asked this to everybody, sir. Yeah, I appreciate that. I asked this last question to everybody. I call it my diamond advice question. So it's a hypothetical. You have your two kiddos, they're all out of the house. They're doing fantastic. You've got those 8 grandkids. It's great. But let's say, for example, they have forgotten all the lessons that you have ever taught them. They have moved on with their lives, but they have one piece of diamond advice, Paul, that they can hold with them that you can pass on to them, that they can continue to move on with their life. What would be the one piece of diamond advice that you would give to your two kiddos?
It's interesting you asked that because I actually gave that to my son yesterday. But uh, always be willing to take a chance, not only on what you're doing, but also on your kids. Uh, don't your your career is important to support your family, but it's not all and you've got a family who supports you. And my advice to my son was is that do what you want to do, what you feel you it's your passion, but have your but your family is important, so they need to be part of that passion, and you'll be successful. And I had to remind him of that because he was kind of going through a he's looking at a career change, and he's having some difficult times where he's currently at, and so he just wanted my advice, and that's what I basically gave him. I know it was probably it wasn't a single word or anything like that, but it was basically have faith, and then have faith in God, have faith in yourself, and have faith in your family because it all come together, and you will succeed at what you want, what you're doing. You may not see it today, but it will show up in the end.
Paul Goranson, it was an honor talking to you, sir. Thanks for joining me.
I appreciate it very much. I thank you for the time. I really appreciate it.